Hello, I'm Richard, and I'm here to tell you that the jewelry world is full of BS. In this case, I'm talking about the B&S measurement system that we use for finding gauges of wire and sheet. It's a measurement system that really, I think, is arbitrary and confusing. By confusing, just let me ask you, have you ever wondered why something like 16, which is a smaller number than 24, is actually thicker and bigger or wider, bigger diameter wire than 24? Those numbers just don't seem to make any sense. So my theory is that Mr. B and S, that was Mr. Brown and Sharp, developed this system one night over probably too many drinks when they had a piece of metal, which was about a half an inch thick, roughly 12 gauge, let's say. And they decided, okay, we're going to start here with this piece, and this will be gauge 0. So 0 gauge wire or sheet, whatever they had to begin with. And so they cranked down the rolling mill and they ran the metal through there once, and then they had 1 gauge, and then they did it again and had 2 gauge, and they continued on 16 times through. Now we have 16 gauge. And a few more times, and pretty soon you get up to 24 gauge. So the number represents the number of times that that sheet of metal went through a rolling mill and reduced it in size, so that as the numbers got bigger, from 16, let's say, to 24, the metal got thinner. So we had this kind of inverse kind of relationship there that gets very confusing. Not only that, let's suppose that you have a piece of 24 gauge and you solder it together with another piece of 24 gauge. Now, what gauge is that sheet? Well, you might think, okay, 24 plus 24 would be 48 gauge, but that would not make sense because 48 is going to be smaller, obviously. So you might think, oh, okay, so 24, we do 2 of them, so maybe it's 12 gauge, but it's not that either. Because 24 gauge soldered to another sheet of 24 gauge is going to come out to be 18 gauge. And the reason makes sense when you look at it metrically or in a metric system, because 24 gauge is half a millimeter, 0.5 millimeters. So 2 sheets of that makes 1 millimeter, and 18 gauge sheet happens to be 1 millimeter. So it seems to me that really we would do a great favor to ourselves if we would abandon the B and S gauge system and do like almost all the rest of the world, with the exception of England, that uses the metric system. It's used in a lot of other areas in medicine, engineering, and why not use it in jewelry exclusively and get rid of the B and S? It would make things so much simpler, especially if you're doubling or halving some quantity of sheet or wire. You can easily find out just by measuring it with an actual machine or device that's measuring something in the world, which we can measure, not some arbitrary gauge system, which seems to make no sense at all to me. So let me know if you agree or disagree. Tell me why. And I hope that maybe you've learned something that might be useful to you along the way. In the meantime, I'll be here to try to present some other interesting jewelry facts, do a few projects. So I hope you'll stick around, subscribe to the video channel, and hope to see you another time. Thank you. Goodbye.